Also, if you need hearing support, please ask our sound engineers at the sound desk in the back. Thank you for that. One final reminder, please pick up the chairs and hymnals after the service so we can clean the area. And welcome. Let's have a good service. And now I'll start singing. What did you say?
Each of our committees will have an information table in the gathering place during coffee hour. So bring your curiosity, questions, suggestions, and willingness to participate both that day and later. There will also be our water communion, so keep that in mind. And later on Sunday, the 11th, will be the inaugural $2 community euchre games. Everyone, members, friends, and strangers are invited to play Mary Adams. What time is that? 4 o'clock. The Lady in Lavender, if you have questions. Science and Society continues their exploration of the brain at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 13th in the gathering place. Information and discussion will take place on our brain's roles in vision and in emotions. There is lots to learn about yourself, even if you haven't seen the previous episodes that they've been studying. The Building and Grounds Committee will host a Rock Around the Ramp party on Saturday, the 17th, from 9 to noon to prepare for Linda Arbogast's memorial service. Snacks and soft drinks will be provided, yay. Mike Darnell has information on the tasks that will be undertaken. If you have questions, Mike, the man in blue. And there's also a sign-up sheet that will be going around so that people can sign up to bring food and flowers for Linda's service. On the island, okay. I'll go ahead and just start it around when I get down. Yeah, her the service is at 3 and her ashes will be scattered in the memorial garden afterwards. The Committee of the Whole, otherwise known as COW, will meet after the potluck on Sunday, the 18th, to discuss the success of the information fair. All committee chairs are invited to participate and kind of requested to participate. Last week's offering brought $168 to share with the Elkhart County Humane Society. This week's offering will go to our sustainability fund, which supports the repair and maintenance of our buildings and grounds, because there are lots of them. And the landscape committee with the parking lot is pretty excited about what's coming up, and there will be more to tell, just to let you know that we're excited about what we accomplished so far. And we'll just keep you in suspense for now.
I'll try to speak into the microphone also. We ring our gong 3 times, once for those who came before us and made a place for us. Once for those of us who are here now. and once for those who will come after us and build on the dream. The chalice lighting today is by the Oberlin UU Fellowship in Oberlin, Ohio. We light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other, and faith in ourselves. Also, to be welcoming to whomever we meet and kind to all living creatures. So gather around this light of hope as we share this time together. As Janelle said, this morning the offering will be going all of it to the sustainability fund. So we can always use extra funds to keep the building going. No. Oh, the covenant. I always forget the covenant. Thank you, Carl, I appreciate it. Please join with me in reciting our unison covenant. It's on the screen and it's in our order of service, but I could forget it anyway. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. Thank you. And now we will give generously to the Sustainability Fund.
let's stand and then she'll play an introduction and I'll help you. This is might be new to some of you, but it's a easy tune. To mercy, to peace, all and those struggles, and to those whose light return their thankfulness. Praise to God and from the dead.
Thank you, Steve. It's always so wonderful to have you lead us. And I would today like to say that I'm very happy to bring to our pulpit once again one of our favorite speakers, the Reverend Dr. Jimmy Clifton.
do with a woman taken. Okay, I'm not going to start over. Another religious leader who founded the Baha'i faith in 1844. His name was Baha'u'llah. It's a tough name to pronounce. He founded the Baha'i faith on the basis that everyone was equal. Nobody was above anyone. Men, women, different races, different religions, everybody was equal. And we treated everybody equally. But he also had a quote, a very profound quote. He said, "The earth is one." I guess that's two. "The earth is one, and mankind its citizens." How incredibly profound is that? The earth is one. I'm sorry, the earth is one country. There we go. The earth is one country, and mankind its citizens. Not only is that profound, but it's very timely. It was timely in his day. It is timely in our day, especially with all of the stuff that's going around, not just here, but around the world. All this craziness about walls and borders and fences. This is not about immigration. This is not about border security. This is about the attempts by so many in society around the world to keep people out, and in some cases, to keep people in. The interesting thing about this quote from Baha'u'llah is that 178 years later, and he founded this religion in Persia, which is today Iran. Listen what's going on in Iran 178 years after this incredibly profound quote. And this comes from the September-October edition of the American Baha'i. And as you can see, the post office mangled it. But listen to this. Fresh wave of arrest and raids across Iran as Baha'is absurdly accused of colonialism. 44 Iranian Baha'is arrested, arraigned, or jailed. 6 Baha'i homes destroyed, and 20 acres of land confiscated by Iranian government agents. Now, this goes on everywhere. It goes on in our own country. This incredible hatred, prejudice, bigotry, a little redundant, that's okay, I use redundancies for emphasis, that continues to exist. As we've watched the news and listened to the news of late, what are we seeing? What are we hearing? Pockets of violence against groups of people that are not like us. I've touched on this before, but I've had a few people ask me to do it again to a certain extent. We see that it's going to increase. It's getting so bad that some of the leading social scientists in America have predicted that within a few years, we may be in a new civil war. That's frightening. It is to me. But that's how bad things have gotten. And the social scientists predict that it might get worse. In March of 1991, March 3rd, in Los Angeles, California, 4 police officers stopped the vehicle, grabbed the driver, and nearly beat him to death. The man's name is Rodney King. 3 of the 4 police officers were acquitted. Caused massive riots throughout Los Angeles for months. And in March, now this is March, in March of that year, Rodney King got on television and he begged people to stop the rioting. And he asked a very profound question. Can we not all just get along? 1991. Is that not a question that can still be asked today? It is, isn't it? Because we're not doing a very good job of getting along one with another. Now, those who study this stuff have come up with reasons why so many of us have these attitudes towards people who are different from us. And it's basically the same across the board, no matter who does the research. 2 main reasons: ignorance, and it is a learned behavior. We learn that growing up from our parents. And those things are pretty easy to deal with. And we deal with that through education. And education is the key to most of the difficulties we have in life, most of the problems we have in this country. We need to be more educated as a people. But what are we seeing today about education? There are people who are discrediting education. People are saying we don't need to be educated. We can learn from the school of hard knocks. And who mock education, mock the academic community. You've seen it, you've heard it, you know what I'm talking about. But what about those instances where that hatred or bigotry or prejudice goes much deeper than simply being ignorant or having just learned something as we've grown up from our parents? What happens when that gets deeper? When it's rooted more deeply than ignorance, or that it's a learned behavior or a learned attitude? What happens is we become hardened in our hearts, become very hard-hearted. The New Testament says a lot about hard hearts. The Buddhism says a lot about hard hearts. The Baha'i faith says a lot about hard hearts because they become calloused. And you know, when we have hardening of the arteries, what happens? Get very sick. Sometimes we die. Metaphorically speaking, when we have hard hearts in attitude, we become spiritually ill and cause a spiritual death. We become emotionally ill, emotionally dead. So the question is, 2 questions this morning. How do we get to that point that our hearts are so hard that we have literal distaste, dislike, maybe even hatred for someone so different from us? And secondly, how do we begin to soften our hearts? The number 1 reason for the hard heart is fear. We fear the unknown. Martin Luther King said the way to deal with fear is to face it and ask ourselves, what am I really afraid of? See, we saw this in the early days of school desegregation in the South. We saw this in the early days of trying to integrate the South. Because as you know, at one time, there separate restaurants, bathrooms, water fountains. I grew up in the South. I saw that. President Eisenhower basically answered that question. Prior to integrating Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, Eisenhower met with a group of business leaders. And he said, here's the problem. We have these fathers who don't want their little white daughters sitting next to little black kids. Why? Fear. The fear that they might get to talk to each other. They might get to become friends. They might want to bring them home. And as they grew and progressed through the grades, they might begin to date each other. They might begin to think about marrying each other. And if that happens, they're going to be children. And that's the issue. That's the issue. Mixed couples, mixed children will depurify the white race. That was the fear. That was the issue. And in those days, and I'm talking history, in those days, they used a despicable term. They call that mongrelization. Because they didn't see black people as humans. They saw them less than humans. That goes on today with what we're seeing, that fear. That's what so much of this gate and wall and fence stuff is. Keeping out people not like us because, say for instance, we have hatred in this country for the Muslims. We don't want them here. Why? Because they will destroy this country with their religion. They will bring Sharia law, which will make this country no longer a Christian nation. This country was never a Christian nation. Yes, at one time, most people in America identified as Christians. Our founding fathers were Christians. Episcopalian, Unitarian, those days Unitarians were Christians. Presbyterian, Congregationalist, they were Christians. But the country was never a Christian nation. But that's the fear. They're going to make it a Muslim nation. They're going to destroy the white race. They're going to destroy main reason for the hardened hearts, the fear. I would ask all of us this morning, I'm going to try to do this with each one of these points. When it comes to people who are different from us, people who are different from you, do you have any fears about people who are different from you? Don't answer it out loud. Just think about it to yourselves. Do I have fears of people who are different from me? The second reason we harden our hearts is that many of us have a lack of empathy. We have a lack of compassion for other people. So much drugs and so much crime, and where children barely are able to eat. And barely able, if at all, to get an education. So these families want to come to America to better themselves. And yet we have so many people with the hard hearts who have no empathy, no sympathy, no compassion for those people. And what do we say? Nobody helped me. So that begs another question. How disadvantaged were you really? You live in a country that has a lot of advantages, a lot of benefits, a lot of opportunity. And you would dare deny that to those who don't? And you're the same people who's not you here, you plural. You're the same people who condemn people wanting to destroy Christianity. And yet that is an essence of Christianity. Helping other people, being compassionate, being caring, doing whatever we can to lift people up, rather than what we do, bring them down. Another reason that we have hard hearts is that we resent people who are different from us, who seem, this is perception, seem to be doing better than we are. This is my country. I should be the CEO of that company. This is my country. I was here first. Why am I not in public office and they are? And we heard that a lot when Ilhan Omar, the Muslim congresswoman from Minnesota, got elected. Bitterness across the country. I've run for office many times. I never got elected. Why did she get elected? Because she's a Muslim. Hard hearts. And then we have hard hearts because we're unwilling to help others. Kind of what I just said. Which is an essence of any faith, I think, no matter what we call ourselves. Isn't our primary responsibility, and our primary responsibility to one another is to help and to serve. I think that was in the covenant, service. So we ask ourselves the question this morning, two questions. Do I lack empathy and compassion for anyone who's different from me? Do I refuse to be of service to anyone who is different from me? Tough questions. Tough questions. But if we are ever going to be all that we can be, if we are ever going to be the best that we can be, shouldn't we ask those questions? And then the last reason for having hard hearts is pride and arrogance. Pride and arrogance. How many of us, nation over, the world over, how many of us feel or think that we are better than they are? We're smarter than they are. We're more moral than they are. We're more ethical than they are. We're more motivated. We're more driven than they are. How many of us have that attitude of pride and arrogance? In the New Testament, it says we should never think of ourselves any higher than anyone else. Again, that can be in most major religions, that attitude. It's certainly an attitude in the Baha'i faith. Certainly an attitude in Buddhism. Pride and arrogance. Does our pride and arrogance get in the way of treating people equally? Does our pride and arrogance get in the way of loving one another? That's one of the major themes of Unitarian Universalism, loving others. There's our pride and arrogance get in the way of that. So now comes the question. How do we soften our hearts? What can we do to help one another soften hearts? First of all, as with anything, no matter what it is we're challenged with, the first step is always the same. We have to want to. We can't be forced. We really can't be persuaded, because most things we do in life boil down, we do them because we want to do them. So in order to soften our hearts, if we have any bit, even a modicum of prejudice or bigotry towards somebody different from me, from us, we have to want to make those changes. We have to want to change our attitude. We have to want to change our beliefs. We have to want to be educated. We have to want to soften our hearts. And then we have to stop fearing those who are not like us. We have to stop fearing those who are not like us. And when we really examine our fears, we will see there's really nothing to fear. I told a story in here, my first sermon, and this was from a sermon by Martin Luther King, who talked about a lady in New York City, lived in a high-rise apartment, and all of a sudden she was fearful of going into her apartment because she was convinced there were snakes under the carpet. And that is most of our fears, isn't it? Even when it comes to people not like us, they're just snakes under the carpet. They're not real fears. They're imagined fears based on misinformation. Based on misinformation. Then we have to step outside of our comfort zone. We have to go places we generally wouldn't go. We have to be willing to meet people we generally wouldn't want to meet or don't want to meet. We have to get to know people that we've in the past had no desire to get to know. Step out of our comfort zone. And you start small because for so many, that's not easy to do. Not just in the area of human relationships. That's most of us in most areas of life. We like our comfort zone. We like being where we are. We have this little imaginary boundary. We just don't want to get outside of that. How do we grow as human beings when we don't allow ourselves to step out of our comfort zones? How do we grow? How do we change? How do we move forward? How do we progress? Unitarian Universalism prouds itself on being a progressive faith. Do we progress when we don't step outside of our comfort zones? The answer is no. Then we have to be willing to build a relationship with those who are different from us. Build a relationship. Is there anyone in your life right now that you vaguely know that's a little different from you, that you could build a relationship with, that you could get to know a little better than you know that person? Would you be willing to step outside of your comfort zone to get to know that individual? I would challenge you to do that. And then we have to practice humility. We have to realize we're no better than anyone else. We might be a little better educated, might have a little more money, a few more possessions. But when it comes down to the basic human heart, the basic human soul, when it comes down to basic humanity, we are really no better than anyone else, and nobody's better than us. That's the essence of the Baha'i faith. Everybody's equal. Everybody's the same. We're all struggling in this life to try to do better, which may be another question for us. How many of us are really trying to do better as human beings? And then finally, when it comes to having a little bit of prejudice, a little bit of bias towards somebody different, I would challenge you to do research on your family tree. You might be surprised how many people are in your family tree that have different backgrounds from you, different religions, different ethnicities, different races, different cultures. You might be surprised. You might be incredibly surprised. So I would challenge you to do that. So we move forward as people of Unitarian Universalism, people of religion, people of humanity. We move forward, making a concerted effort to follow that golden rule that's in so many religions, to treat people we want to be treated, and from this day forward, to begin to dismantle the myths and the fears we have of people who are different from us. Amen.
Let's stand as we sing the last hymn, number 18. What wondrous love is this, oh my soul, my soul. What wondrous love is this, what wondrous love is this. such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul. When precious when I was dreaming round friends came and found all my soul. Friends found my soul. You to love and sing, to love and to song and praise. Yeah, I was yeah, I was.
And now may we go forward. Fresh start, new beginning. Make a commitment to ourselves and to one another to learn, to grow, to love, to extend mercy, and to extend grace to all with whom we come into contact. Amen.